statement. Its spokesperson has said that Iran does not consider the war with the US and Israel to be over.
The new escalation in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has seized 2 ships.
The U.S. and Iran trading new threats around the Strait of Hormuz.
The radar operator on USS Princeton sees them first, 5 fast-rising contacts. Lifting out of the Bandar Abbas axis, then dropping low over the black water until the returns smear into the clutter of merchant traffic. And in the Combat Information Center, every screen suddenly matters because a Nimitz-class supercarrier sits inside the tightest maritime throat on Earth with nowhere to hide and very little sea room to waste. At 0347 hours, the track file updates again, the speed jumps, the geometry sharpens, and everyone in the room understands the same thing at the same time. If these are Iranian MiG-29s pressing south, then the next 21 minutes decide whether the Strait of Hormuz remains a tense transit lane or becomes the flashpoint that pulls half the region into open combat. And the first American pilot to turn toward them is already too far north. The Strait of Hormuz is not just another patch of water. It is a funnel, a pressure valve, a place where geography compresses power into a strip of sea so narrow that every tanker master, every air defense officer, every coastal radar crew, and every government in the region watches it like a pulse line. At its most sensitive point, the strait narrows into traffic lanes that leave almost no margin for error. Commercial shipping, naval escorts, surveillance aircraft, patrol boats, and coastal missile units all operate inside the same crowded battle space. And because enormous volumes of global energy transit through this corridor, every tactical move here carries strategic weight far beyond the horizon. Source: Iran understands that better than anyone because the northern shore belongs to Iran. Its coastline, islands, missile sites, small boat bases, and radar positions give Tehran a natural home field advantage in any crisis inside the Gulf. Even when its aircraft inventory shows age, Iran still fields real capability. Layered coastal defenses, anti-ship missile forces, fast attack craft, ground-based surveillance, and a fighter arm that remains dangerous when it operates close to its own support network. Iran's MiG-29 fleet is older, yes, but not irrelevant. The aircraft still serves invisible air defense roles, still flies live-fire drills, and still carries the R-73 short-range missile that can turn a close merge into a lethal problem very quickly. Iran also backs its air power with a broader missile architecture that analysts continue to describe as the most extensive and diverse in the Middle East. Source. Now look at the American side. A U.S. supercarrier does not sail alone. It sails inside a system. The carrier provides reach, sortie generation, and the political signal that Washington can put sovereign air power anywhere at sea. Around it, the strike group adds layers: Aegis escorts with SPY-1 radar, combat air patrols of F divided by a -18E divided by F Super Hornets, electronic warfare support, and the airborne command and control umbrella of the E-2 Hawkeye family. The Hawkeye is the eyes of the fleet for a reason. Its mission is not only to detect threats, but to manage the battle itself: airborne early warning, command and control, surface surveillance, and coordination across the entire strike group. The newer E-2D adds a radar and battle management leap designed specifically to handle difficult environments, including cluttered littoral battle space like the Gulf. Source. That is why this scenario is plausible. Not because either side wants a full war. Exactly the opposite. The most dangerous moments in the Gulf usually emerge when both sides want control without escalation, signaling without surrender, pressure without collapse. Iran wants to prove that even the largest American warship remains vulnerable inside a constrained choke point. The United States wants to prove that a carrier strike group can transit contested water without losing freedom of action for even a second. Both sides aim for deterrence. Both sides believe discipline keeps the situation contained. And that is precisely why a single misread radar picture, a single aggressive intercept, or a single overconfident plan can send the entire balance off the rails. Geography makes everything worse. To the north, Iranian territory offers short internal flight lines, coastal masking, and island positions around Keshem, Larak, and Abu Musa that complicate radar geometry. To the south, the Omani side opens a wider escape arc, but not enough to erase the basic reality of the channel. In daylight the water is crowded. At night the heat haze and surface returns distort distance and confidence alike. Civilian radar tracks weave through the same space that military aircraft must cross. A fighter pilot sees navigation lights and wakes. A shipboard operator sees ambiguity. A commander sees seconds disappearing. And tonight, every one of those seconds matters. The Iranian plan is not reckless. That is the first thing to understand. It is calculated. In Bandar Abbas, the mission briefing is built around a brutal fact: 5 MiG-29s cannot destroy a US supercarrier by themselves. So the goal is not cinematic destruction. The goal is operational disruption. Force the carrier to turn into defense. Freeze flight deck rhythm. Break the outer combat air patrol. Push even one aircraft through the screen far enough to generate a visual on the carrier and a confirmed firing line for the wider coastal network. In Tehran's logic, that alone counts as a strategic success. If a US supercarrier must fight for breathing space inside Hormuz, then the message lands everywhere from Washington to Riyadh to the global energy market. The package splits into layers before takeoff. 2 MiG-29s form the visible spearpoint. They climb higher and show themselves first. Their job is to draw the American cap north and make the intercept look obvious. 3 more stay lower, riding beneath the cleaner radar picture, timing their run against the density of merchant traffic moving through the separation scheme. The 5 aircraft carry a mix built for air combat, not fantasy. R-27 medium-range missiles to threaten the cap, R-73s for the merge, internal cannon for the desperate final seconds, and just enough fuel margin to gamble on speed rather than endurance. But the aircraft alone are not the trick. At 0352 hours, a tanker near the northern lane transmits a garbled distress call about steering instability. It is not a pirate drama. It is not a mayday that fools professionals into panic. It is something subtler and more useful. A noise source. A distraction. A reason for attention to bend for 30 seconds at exactly the wrong time. Almost simultaneously, several IRGCN fast boats begin maneuvering in patterns that are aggressive enough to trigger tracking, but not aggressive enough to justify immediate fire. Surface clutter rises. Radio traffic thickens. The tactical picture does not break. It stretches. That stretch is the opening the attackers want. The lead Iranian pilot believes the Americans will respond the way disciplined carrier crews always respond, by prioritizing the obvious threat first. 2 high contacts appear north of Larak. Cap turns to engage. The carrier's deck cycle shifts. The escorts tighten formation logic. In the confusion, the low trio punch through the seam, pop up inside the outer screen, and suddenly the giant ship with the flight deck looks less like a distant symbol and more like a reachable object. On paper, it is elegant. The confidence inside the Iranian package is real. Their timing uses the terrain. Their route uses the clutter. Their planners assume the Americans will be cautious about firing too early in dense civilian traffic. They also assume the carrier group's radar picture will fragment near the coast, where land, sea, and ship returns merge into one ugly electronic mess. Every mile closer to the strait favors the side with shorter distances, more shore sensors, and more local familiarity. Every mile deeper into Hormuz should, in theory, shrink the carrier's freedom to maneuver. And yet one detail refuses to fit. The southern sector looks too quiet. No one in the Iranian briefing room sees a clear American picket south of the main shipping flow. No destroyer paints strong enough to dominate that slice of the picture. No interceptor pair shows the exact geometry the mission planners expect. The route looks open. Almost suspiciously open. The attackers read that silence as absence. The Americans read it as design. At 0356 hours, the 5 MiG-29s cross their final navigation gate. 2 climb. 3 disappear into the surface clutter. The radio brevity turns crisp. Distances shrink. Fuel numbers start to matter. The lead pilot sees the plan coming together exactly as briefed. And that is the moment the plan becomes most dangerous. Because a trap works best just before it snaps shut. At 0358 hours, the first American cap section commits north. 2F divided by a -18E Super Hornet swing toward the high pair of MiG-29s. Their radar search, lock, update. On the USS Princeton, the Aegis team watches the high tracks brighten exactly where they expect them to brighten. On the carrier, deck crews begin converting from routine transit posture to something much sharper. Yellow shirts point. Ordnance crews move. Another pair of Super Hornets starts for the catapults. No one speaks louder than necessary. No one wastes motion. But the tempo changes. At 0359 hours, the deception hits full effect. The tanker distress call spikes again. An IRGCN swarm veers closer to a commercial vessel and then away. Surface tracks overlap. The northbound cap sees the 2 high MiGs split wide and force geometry problems immediately. One fulcrum noses hot, threatening a head-on R-27 shot. The other drifts west, dragging the intercept farther from the carrier's central axis. It is not random. It is disciplined bait. 11 seconds later, the low trio break from the clutter. They are not invisible. Nothing in modern combat stays invisible for long. But they are late enough and low enough to be dangerous. Their returns bloom south of Keshem like knives rising out of dark water. Speed high. Altitude low. Course direct. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Air Defense Coordinator sees the shape of the raid all at once. 2 decoys high. 3 real penetrators low. The call goes out across the network. New vectors. New priorities. New danger. At 0400 hours, the first shots leave the rails. The high Iranian pair launch are 27s at long range, not because the odds are perfect, but because the missiles force the cap defensive. One American Super Hornet brakes hard and dumps altitude. The other cranks east and pours speed into the turn. Their formation opens. Their clean intercept line vanishes. 4-5 critical seconds, the Iranian bait does exactly what it is meant to do. Down low, the three penetrating MiG-29s stay fast and disciplined. They do not chatter. They do not climb unnecessarily. One pilot uses the tanker wake and merchant returns as reference points. Another keeps his nose just above the black horizon, waiting for the pop-up cue that brings the carrier group from theory into sight. At 0401 hours, the carrier launches its alert pair. Steam erupts. Catapults fire. Two more Super Hornets claw into the night carrying AM-120 AMRAAMs and AM-9XS, but they need time to climb, sort, and join a fight that is already moving too quickly. On the escorts, SPY-1 tracks multiply. Engagement logic tightens. Every operator in the strike group feels the same pressure. Identify correctly, shoot decisively, and do both before the low trio reaches the range where chaos becomes unavoidable. Then the first real cost appears. At 0402 hours, one of the outbound American Hornets takes a proximity burst from an R-27 that arrives closer than anyone on the US side wants to admit. The missile does not vaporize the jet. Real combat rarely looks that clean. It tears the left side of the aircraft with fragments, shreds control response, and turns a fast climb into a losing struggle. The pilot stays with the aircraft just long enough to point it away from the traffic lanes and away from the carrier's own formation. Then the seat fires. A parachute opens over black water lit only by distant mast lights and the afterburner glare of aircraft still fighting above him. Nobody cheers. Nobody pauses. The rescue problem enters the net, and the battle keeps moving. Now the defenders are honestly behind the rhythm. At 0403 hours, one low MiG pops just high enough to sweep with radar, then drops again. Another shifts west toward the cruiser screen. The third stays centered, nose pointed at the carrier's predicted position. In the cockpit, the Iranian pilots feel the same surge every attacking aircrew feels when a complicated plan survives first contact. Maybe it really works. Maybe the Americans do not have the seam covered. Maybe the giant in the channel really is opening. On USS Mason, weapons crews stand by for a shot that does not come yet. On the carrier, flight deck crews pull clear of exposed positions as the ship turns and speed changes to complicate the geometry. On the bridge, every course correction is measured against merchant traffic, escort spacing, and the fact that a supercarrier cannot simply jink like a patrol craft in a narrow lane. At 0404 hours, the low-lead MiG reaches the outer edge of visual possibility. Not visual certainty. Visual possibility. That difference matters. The pilot can now imagine the carrier ahead of him, somewhere beyond the escorts and dark sea, somewhere behind the electronic fog. The plan says this is the moment of acceleration. Push harder. Force the Americans to defend the ship, not the airspace. Create panic. Create compression. Create one firing opportunity, one radar lock, one visual confirmation, one strategic image that proves the entire operation. The carrier group feels it too. The escorts are no longer dealing with a distant approach. They are dealing with a closing knife. At 0405 hours, the lead low MiG rises again. For a breath, the outcome seems decided. 0406 hours. Everything accelerates. One Iranian MiG turns east. Too predictable. A Super Hornet catches him with an AIM-120 shot before he regains clean spacing. Another dives for the clutter. Mason's radar keeps him long enough for the second intercept. Splash. The third low MiG pulls up hard, trying to force a close merge and drag the fight into the R-73 envelope. For 3 seconds, it almost works. Then a carrier-launched Hornet slashes across his nose and sends an AIM-9X off the rail. The missile tracks through the turn. Fireball. Wreckage. Silence on that frequency. Up high, the two decoys finally understand the truth. Their job no longer matters because the penetrating package no longer exists. They turn north. One escapes first contact by diving back toward the coast, fast and disciplined, using every knot left in the jet. The other hesitates half a second too long, trying to support his wingman with one last radar commit. That half second kills him. An AMRAAM reaches him before Iranian ground controllers can rebuild the picture. 0407 hours. Only one MiG-29 remains airborne and retreating. The US strike group does not chase recklessly over the coastline. That restraint matters. The point is not vengeance. The point is control. Rescue forces begin moving toward the downed American pilot. Escorts tighten again. Flight deck rhythm returns, still tense, still fast, but no longer braking. 0408 hours. 21 minutes after the first radar contact, the charge is over. 4 Iranian MiG-29s are destroyed. 1 retreats north damaged and low on fuel. The carrier remains afloat, maneuvering, and fully inside the fight. The narrow waterway is still open. The strategic message, however, has changed completely. Iran proves that it can generate a dangerous, coordinated raid in the most sensitive choke point on the planet. The United States proves that a modern carrier strike group fights as a network, not as a single ship. And that difference decides the night. What this scenario reveals about real-world naval doctrine is simple. In modern maritime warfare, the side that sees first, shares first, and decides first usually wins before the closest range weapons ever become decisive. Platforms still matter. Pilots still matter. Geography still matters. But in a place like Hormuz, networked awareness matters most of all. The attacker counts on clutter, compression, and human overload. The defender survives by turning every radar, every aircraft, and every escort into one synchronized combat system. That is what deterrence at sea looks like now. Not invulnerability.